Welcome to the Industrial Automation Insider Podcast. My name is Matt Van Bogart, and I'm Senior Business Development Manager here at Zebra. And I work very closely with global partners, sales teams that spend time understanding and working with customers within the industrial automation space. And today, I'm very excited to have two guests join me today to talk about some of the challenges that are facing manufacturing and automation. So first up is Jake Hall, who's better known as the manufacturing millennial. He's an engineer by trade and training and has been working in the field of supporting manufacturers and folks in operations to understand how to deal with skills gap, worker knowledge, this whole transition between next generation folks coming into the trades, et cetera. So I'm very excited to have him join us today. Also joining us is Sath Rao. Sath is currently the Director of Global Manufacturing Strategy at Zebra. Sath has an extensive background working in this space, specifically for companies like Hitachi, Ventara, PTC, Schneider Electric, as well as working as an analyst for consulting firm Frost & Sullivan. So both Sath and Jake bring to this conversation years of experience in automation and manufacturing. So I'm very thankful to have you both on the show today.
It's great to be here, Matt.
Pleasure to join you, Matt. And I like the description you had for Jake. So I'm perhaps the manufacturing graybeard today.
Excellent. Well, we get to talk about the market from a couple different perspectives then. So that's good. So I wanted to start this conversation about some of the common challenges facing manufacturing today. There are all sorts of information in the press and news about, labor shortages, supply chain bottlenecks, changing expectations from customers, et cetera. And I really wanted to get both of your perspectives in terms of what you're seeing in the market, what people you are talking to and what they're saying, and perhaps trying to understand what companies can do when they're looking ahead to their business in 2024. What are some of the major things that they should be focusing on in terms of their planning efforts for 2024? So Jake, I know that you've been really focused in this space over the course of the last year and a half coming out of the pandemic. I'd love to hear some of the inputs or some of the feedback that you're seeing and hearing from folks when you're out in the field.
I mean, I think the first thing that we need to do is address what the general public thinks of when we hear of manufacturing and the issues that are around that. So when we think of manufacturing, when we hear of manufacturing, it's the general news and the public, and even your parents are saying, hey, automation is going to take your job. Robots are going to take your job. Technology is going to take your job. And so immediately from a very young age, or from when a younger person is looking at what type of career they want to go into, or what type of profession or education they want to go into, they immediately hear that manufacturing or automation or warehouses, is an industry that is not going to be long-term capable for you. Because, they might have jobs now, but they're not going to have jobs for you in 5 years. They're not going to have jobs for you in 10 years. And there's I would say our own industry fault for that. We saw a shift going back in the 80s and 90s where we saw a lot of jobs leave, this area and head overseas. And there's truth to that. But I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing this revitalization of what manufacturing is now, where now manufacturing truly has become a global scale process, where we're in a totally global manufacturing economy now, where there isn't necessarily these isolated manufacturing areas across the world. Everyone's interacting with everyone. Everyone can buy from anyone. Anyone can source from anyone. So now all of a sudden, when we come to this great common denominator of the capability of manufacturing, manufacturers need to look at other ways to drive productivity, and I guess you could even say future security of their company in the road ahead. And I think that that's done by a couple ways. One is by what we're hearing now from companies is the successful adoption of new technologies and automation. So there's a lot of buzzwords that are out there. There's robots, there's digital twins and digital solutions based around manufacturing, where manufacturing is no longer just this, I guess you could say, physical industry. It's just as much of a digital industry as it is a physical industry now when it comes to products and solutions. But now what we're seeing is manufacturing is now an industry that I think is truly focused around people than just the processes itself. And because I think what we hit is we did hit a certain wall when it comes to the capabilities of what automation and technology can do on its own. Now, AI is going to transform the industry. We're going to see a larger shift when it comes to AI and technology over the years. By the end of the day, AI is a tool. It's not a great solver of stuff. And so what needs to happen is we still need people. And that's kind of where the second point it comes into is the adoption of technology, but also the recognition that people bring to the industry. One of my favorite moments was listening to an Elon Musk interview, and he says, automation is hard. And we don't give enough recognition to the people that are in manufacturing that do those jobs. And I think that's the big thing right now is we really begin to realize the importance of people, the importance of frontline workers in manufacturing, and the importance to keep them here. But we're ultimately facing the problem where in the US right now, there's 700,000 unfulfilled jobs in manufacturing because of the lack of skills and available, people to do those jobs. But we're going to see a massive threshold by 2030 or 2035, those numbers are going to be well over 2 million. So the next generation of millennials and Gen Zs is what is going to be fulfilling those jobs. And we need as an industry to focus on how do we better attract those generations who have a different mindset in how they want to work. They have a different mindset of how they want to be paid. They have a different mindset of how they want to have personal and professional growth. They have a different mindset of what it's like between working for a company, but also having a life outside of work. And those are all things that are really becoming to the forefront of a true collaboration of emerging technologies and emerging generations.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I see and hear similar things as well. Just obviously reading the news, but also being out talking with partners and visiting customers. Certainly, those are topics that are front and center, at least here in North America, which is where I've been spending most of my time recently. So, Seth, I wanted to get your perspective. Jake talked a lot about convergence of people and technology, and I know that you've spent a lot of time evangelizing the convergence of OT and IT. I'd love to get your perspective in terms of what you see happening in that convergence, and are there specific things companies and manufacturers are doing to plan ahead for that convergence, and what are some of the things that they should be thinking about as they look ahead to 2024 and beyond?
Correct. No, thanks for the question, Matt. So I'll give you two anecdotes. I started my career in manufacturing a good 20 years ago. So, and then this was for an international engineering, procurement, and construction company. We were setting up large, refining units, etc. And the moment we got a contract, the first thing we were told was, within 2 weeks, you need to specify for the control valves and release the orders. It was like, why? I mean, this is, we designed the whole project first, but it was like, look, the lead time for control valves is 36 months, almost 3 years. And so by the time, so you need to focus on getting the most important things done first, right? And 36 years is roughly close to about 144, 145 weeks. And so fast forward 20 years, and now very recently I visited a Midwestern electrics company. They are actually a welding company, but they've developed exotic metallurgy and capabilities around 3D printing, and it takes them 1 week to produce one of these control valves, right? So from a convergence, a technology, maturity, and then supply chain perspective, there's greening of the supply chain. There is focus around newer technologies which are disrupting conventional processes around, how we do things, etc. And to your question around IT and OT, this is completely changing the way we kind of operate with people, processes, and technologies, right? And so typically on the IT and OT side, people, 5 years ago would say, oh, it's all about culture. They have a different KPI. How can you get all of them to work together? But really now it's kind of morphed beyond just that cultural glue into looking at what are new technologies on the IT side. So if you look at new technologies on the IT side, there's AI, there's workflow, things like that. And then on the OT side, newer set of technologies like, you have machine vision, you have mobile robotics. Robotics in the early days was all kind of, behind fenced curtains. Then it moved into, okay, light curtains, and now they are moving along with workers, right? And so this concept of IT/OT, in my opinion, is now not around the conventional aspects of convergence, but around newer aspects of combinatorial innovation, which is how can I mix and match? How can I use an IT system to order when I'm running short of human resources on the shop floor because of either attrition or aging workforce, or just people not wanting to look at manufacturing as a long-term career. And in my interviews with customers, they kind of come back and say, well, you know what, we have attrition as high as 40%, right? So people work for a week and a half, and then they're like, hey, I don't like manufacturing anymore, right? And so the ability to use these new technologies in more fulfilling ways, giving a new sense of purpose to young engineers who are very creative, who want to use these new technologies, a smart handheld device, almost like, looking at gaming as the opportunity to kind of, drive productivity metrics. And then there are certain software companies who are also kind of, trying to bring that gaming element into manufacturing, making it more attractive for the, young workers. So those are some, macro to micro changes that I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's amazing because I hear about how all the high tech tools and software capabilities and technologies that the OT side of the business now has, and manufacturing really has become high tech. So just to add an anecdote to yours, Saf, last week I was at Dreamforce in San Francisco, and I was surprised by the number of sessions and events and topics that Salesforce.com had around manufacturing, operations, field support, etc., etc. This is not something that you would have thought of, perhaps maybe even 5 years ago from a company like Salesforce. So they're drawing in a lot of young engineers, young people, young workers that maybe traditionally have been geared towards like IT or writing applications or working as a software engineer, but a lot of those platforms are making themselves extremely relevant on the shop floor and on the factory floor. And I think that's a huge opportunity for young people that are looking to make a difference and understand how they can, give back to manufacturing in North America, as an example, as a way to leverage kind of their background and growing up being someone immersed in the digital world and bringing that into something that can be extremely relevant for the future and for manufacturing in particular. So,
very well said. In fact, it's like, bringing retail-like experiences into the manufacturing floor, right? Not just for the worker, but also for the manufacturing customer, giving them visibility and things like that.
Yeah. So Jake, I wanted to ask you, are there things that you've seen from the IT side or from an engineering side that is kind of shaping your viewpoint of what high tech means in manufacturing and operations? Are there things that you've heard of or maybe even seen personally that could really help capture the interest of a young person that's possibly looking for a career and wants to understand, what are some of the things companies are doing in this space that could be really exciting?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just to bounce off of what we're talking about with IT and OT earlier with SAF was the visualization of data and the visualization of the direct impact that an employee can make to the company and see what they're doing in terms of like either its production or how they're affecting what's happening that day, I think is extremely important. It's the idea of like gamification, right? Millennials and Gen Zs love data. They love metrics. They love after playing that video game to see what was their accuracy ratio or what was their favorite, tool or thing that they use in their video game. That directly transfers to manufacturing. When we're able to go out there and we're able to show them from a visual perspective what their real-time impact is on the manufacturing floor, I think it's significant. When we go out there, we look at gamification of, let's say, in a warehouse facility where they're doing third-party picking, right? You have 200,000 square feet of warehouse of shelves of product. They're going out there, they're grabbing that product out of that, cardboard box, or putting it on a robot, or they're putting it on a cart and hauling it around, and they have that visualization. Companies are finding true success rate when it comes to digitalizing that information. So all of a sudden they can say, hey, who are the top 5 performers that day? What was your pick rate today compared to what was your pick rate yesterday? And giving that visualization, a lot of times, I don't want to say necessarily gives an incentive, but it gives a direct closed loop of how individuals can make an impact. And I think that's just the big thing when it comes to millennials and Gen Zs, and you look at their characteristics. One of the biggest driving factors when it comes to why people want to work for a company beyond the paycheck is what purpose do they have, what impact do they create, and what change can they do. And I think it goes, and that goes back to that digital question that you were asking, Matt, is that companies who leverage digital interaction between their process and their worker to see a significant growth in terms of productivity, but also employee satisfaction as well, right? Because us as younger generations, we're glued to our phones, we're glued to technology, and companies that allow their employees to leverage digital technology, what they're familiar with, become a lot more susceptible to wanting to stay at the company versus leaving the company. So that's some of the things that I've seen. I mean, the other thing that I just see companies embracing when it comes to like digital technology is it's truly a common denominator in terms of by working across multi-generational groups, but also from different demographics. I was at not even an hour ago before the session, I was at a local manufacturer conglomerate of here in Michigan. And there's companies that are completely rolling out a bilingual working group within the company. So it's a 10,000 plus employee manufacturer. It's a giant manufacturer, but they started over a year ago creating it. So all the technology, all the solutions, all the HMI screens, all the interaction was bilingual capable. And I think that's just the one thing that when we look at digital solutions from an analog perspective of writing, on a piece of paper at one time, you never had that capability to have multi-language, multi-interaction, but through digital solutions and transformation and, building on that, that OT layer on the manufacturing floor, you have so much more capability where all of a sudden manufacturers can reach demographics that never worked for them before, that can reach groups of people that never came to work for that manufacturer because, hey, let's face it, most of manufacturing here in America is an English-speaking country. Yet we're a country full of massive different demographics that are being pulled in regionally. Here in West Michigan, I think we've had like a 75% increase of Hispanic people in working West Michigan. So they're like, hey, no other manufacturer is changing the way they work to bring in a new community. They'll adapt, and they found massive success through it. So it goes back down to digital tools and technology enabling you to do things that otherwise you couldn't do.
Yeah, interesting. So, Saf, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about as well is that, this kind of goes around this whole focus around, manufacturing being, being close to the market that it serves. And there's been a lot of talk both in Europe and North America about onshoring manufacturing back to the U.S., consolidating supply chains. I think Jake's example is an is a very interesting one. How does a growing local manufacturer reach out and attract employees to come into their operations? I think that's a fantastic example. When we talk about automation investments, when we talk about onshoring, when we talk about companies looking to tighten their supply chains, what are some of the, or maybe what are two or three things some of these companies could be thinking about in 2024 as they're looking ahead to streamline their manufacturing and make their operations overall more robust and more integrated?
Correct. So I'll start off by giving you two quick examples, perhaps, and to give you an international flavor. Recently, I was in Eastern Europe a couple of months ago. We were doing a Zebra manufacturing maturity model assessment for one of our automotive tier twos, or perhaps it was a tier three. They were a feeder shop into one of the larger automotive companies. So they were making the fenders for these cars, and really this was in Eastern Europe, as I said, and they were running short of labor. And so we did a plant walkthrough, and we were on the mezzanine floor and kind of looking at the inspection bay, and they had about 6 or maybe 5 inspection bays, and only 2 were occupied. And there was this petite lady who was kind of bent over this fender, and she had a very swaying motion, kind of looking at the fender and visually inspecting for
Mm-hmm.
defects and aberrations, etc. And the gentleman kind of who was taking us around the plant, pat me on my back and said, "Hey, don't look, but this lady is from Ukraine, because look, we can't get people to do this job because it's dull and boring." And so for us, in our minds, it was like, oh, Zebra has a recently acquired company called Matrox, and this which makes machine vision systems, which is great for actual visual inspections for defects. And to your question on saying, hey, with the supply chain changes, onshoring, etc., the number one challenge people face is quality, right? Then they face issues around labor productivity and getting the labor to do these dull and dirty jobs, and sometimes they could even be dangerous jobs, and sometimes they are what we like to call them as dear jobs, i.e. Very expensive, right? So they start looking at robotics, and almost all those technologies might seem at first glance that they are displacing humans, but actually they are doing those jobs that humans don't want to do. It's repetitive, it's boring, until unless they have some very tight compulsions, like this lady from Ukraine, right? And so that was a great example for using new technology to overcome some of these supply chain challenges, right? Be it quality, be it labor, etc. The other example very recently was again a Midwestern welding shop, and they were talking about, hey, this is a small and medium business. Look, the number one jobs that are still vacant in the US, which, by the way, happen to be very high paying, and it's a quiz for you folks. You guys know what the number one manufacturing job? I know we have UAW labor negotiations going on now, but it's the job of a welder. It's very difficult to get those very good welding skills, and this guy is running a small and medium enterprise, and is saying, hey, how do I meet my customer orders? I don't have enough people, and hey, I'm saying no to these orders. And very quickly he sees the benefits of a robotic arm, with 3 degrees of freedom, which can actually be taught to do this welding just by the automated motions. It kind of self-learns, and then you have machine vision cameras to inspect the quality of the weld. Suddenly now has doubled his business in about a year's time, right? So initially, which was something like, oh, we need to go maybe import these products from outside the country. They're suddenly kind of saying, oh, we could do this using technology, etc. So I think that's the macro story that we are seeing around both, not just in Europe, but here in the US as well.
Are there, Jake, from your perspective as well, are there maybe two things you think companies should be looking ahead at and planning for? And I'll leave the canvas pretty blank. It could be on any number of topics, but is there, two things that continue to be front and center in your mind based upon a lot of the conversations you're having out there in your travels?
I mean, what comes to mind right away, and that's the use of AI. And I think that's the big thing. From AI is going to be a tool that companies are going to be using at one end or the other. It could be the front office where you're using ChatGPT to do generative AI to create a marketing campaign for you, or to write a memo on a new policy that's happening at work. All the way to, hey, AI is being used by, we're seeing a ton of it now for AI being put into robotics, automation, and vision systems for inspection. The whole idea is to make, technology easier to implement for companies, especially for those small to medium-sized companies that, that Seth was talking about. So I think one is companies need to embrace AI, but they need to be smart in how they do it. There's a lot of risks that come with AI. There's a lot of unknowns that still come with AI, but it's not one of those things that I would say you can turn a blind eye to for the next 2 years until regulations and policy and all that stuff happen, and then think you're going to get caught up. I think it's going to be a massive separator from that side. So the other thing I'm going to answer is a non-technical question, because I'm hoping Saf might be able to touch more on that side. But it's the power of company brand and perception, I think, is the other big thing. Companies now need to realize that they are looked at from a online perspective by future employees, by future customers, on a daily basis now. And if you as a company are not establishing an online presence that views you as a positive company or customer to work with, you're going to have a really hard time attracting that next generation to come and work for you. So, and I'm not saying you need to go out there and you need to build a multi-million-dollar online social campaign that's going to turn you into a massive interactive thing out there, but you need to be showing, I would say, you need to be less focused on the products that you are bringing to the market, but more focused on the people that work for you, because people relate to people, they don't relate to products. And if they can go out there and show, how is this company creating purpose? How is this company driving the success of their future employees? How is this company investing in their employees beyond just a paycheck? And I'm not talking about, hey, here's our new pizza party that we hosted for our employees on second shift. No, that's not great. You need to go out there and say, hey, this is how we advance the career of the people. This is how we're investing in our local community to drive awareness to technology or to STEM, or to show how that manufacturer is impacting areas. So, and all that can be done through a social media presence that is doing that area. Because I still go online. And I walked a trade show last year, and I just mentioned this because I have the numbers for it, where 47% of the companies who were attending that trade show, who paid well over $10,000 to have a booth at the show, didn't even have an active social media account, either through Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And it blows my mind where those are all free platforms that we can put content and create conversations on, yet those companies still don't see the value of what online presences can do. So that's the other other second topic that I would hit on would be AI. How are you going to embrace that? How are you going to use it? And then the impact of company brands and personal brands through social media as leveraging as a tool.
Excellent. Saf, to you, two things you think companies need to be looking at and focusing on in 2024 to drive their businesses forward.
I'll give you three. So it's the 3 Ds, like I like to call them, right? The first one is, look, if you're in manufacturing, you're talking about your factories, you need to start looking at it as a digital factory, right? And when you really talk about digital, it's looking at IT/OT convergence that I talked about before, right? Which is leveraging newer technologies, not for the sake of, oh, it's new, it's shiny, but how can I drive innovation on the shop floor, right? That's the first D. The second D is around digital entropy, a concept that our CTO often talks about, which is, and without really going into the world of metaphysics and talking about entropy and things like that, but the general idea is that with digitization you have lots of data, and really data is now increasingly being generated at the edge, connected devices, IoT, and things like that. And does it make sense to take all this data, put it back to the cloud, or radio it back to a central repository in the shop floor, and then drive analytics around it? It's give insights where data is being produced. So the concept of digital entropy, therefore, is leveraging AI at the edge, which is intelligent devices, smart cameras. We talked about AI right out of the box, right? A smart camera which can diagnose and then detect, quality issues, etc. And the third D is around entrepreneurism. Is that, look, when, and I think all of us talked about this broad concept of, look, it's profits. Yes, you need to generate profits, but there also needs to be purpose behind it. But really, to get and attract and retain talent on the manufacturing floor, and perhaps even beyond, outside the four walls of the factory, you need to give them a sense of empowerment so that they feel that they have access to data and they can take informed decisions that impact productivity, that impact profits, everything else. So it's kind of instigating that sense of creative entrepreneurship, right? In the worker, who now kind of can feel empowered to take decisions which drive change, positively impact the KPIs. So these three Ds, I think, are very important for not just 2024, but well beyond.
Excellent. Well, hey, guys, I wanted to thank you for your time this afternoon, and I will ask that we maybe regroup in 6 months and take stock of what we've learned and what we've seen in the next 6 months. Jake, I'm sure I'll see you out on the show trail at some point. So for our audience, a couple things that I want to leave you with is, first off, please go and check out Jake's website, The Manufacturing Millennial, and find him on LinkedIn. His content is amazing. He somehow pulls in, it seems like, Jake, almost daily interesting videos and clips where you show operations in manufacturing. I have no idea how you come up with some of this stuff, but it's a treat to see, and it's good to see someone promoting, I guess, the positive side of manufacturing in North America. Second of all, I would like to encourage you all to visit Your Edge blog and click on the podcast tab and catch up on past episodes of this Industrial Automation Insider podcast. And then lastly, if you would like to connect with Saf, myself, or anyone at Zebra, you can click on the Contact Us button on the page below, or you can find Saf and I on LinkedIn. So Jake, Saf, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you both soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.